Hello and welcome to
Dragons,
Unicorns,
and Other Creative Creatures.
And boy, are we creatured today.
We are creatured, we're creative. This is amazing, guys. This is the second part of our two-part feature of a Poets panel for National Poetry Month. So whether you're watching this during National Poetry Month, which is April, or any other time, because poetry should not just be limited to a month any more than romance should be relegated to one day in February. At the card and flower industry say, hey, let's celebrate it then. Poetry is for all the time. And in fact, I don't know if we want to specifically introduce our guests again as we did before, but L.J. Cohen made a comment about the importance of poetry and sanity while we were off camera, and I think it's important because whenever you're reading or listening to or creating poetry, I thought it was an interesting point.
Poetry really is how I keep whatever tenuous thread on my sanity, how I keep hold of it is through writing poetry.
And I think for a lot of creatives, whatever it is we choose to create is very frequently.
It's a lifeline.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, it's interesting because also when we're off camera, and I don't know that you were in hearing shot, but I'm walking out and I say to LJ, I was like, something about that, poetry has saved my life more than once. And you had an immediate response.
Oh, yeah.
You were like,
oh, yeah.
Poetry has saved your life. Writing poetry, not reading it, or both?
Both.
Both. So now we've been doing.
Nobody's ever said that about television. I don't think. I know people have said it about music.
Yeah.
When David Bowie died, I had a lot of peers who wrote that his music and the lyrics specifically, which is again considered by many poetry, got them through some very hard times. I'm not sure. I would love to be able to write stories that did that for people, and I do think romance can do it, and any genre can because if you focus on emotion and you hit the emotion and you resonate, which is what we talked about in the first part, it can happen. But to hear you all say that and nod, dramatically, that poetry has saved your life.
Well, I think one of the things is that there is a moment, and I had asked in the first show, I had said, have you ever killed yourself in a poem? And you both kind of looked at me because I didn't state it clearly, I guess. But when we talked about it more, you said, that there's a death, there's a rebirth, there's a transformation. There are times when you feel like so wretched or so pained or so suicidal. I've had people read some of my poems and say they think I was suicidal. Well, the whole fact was because I wrote the poem, I wasn't suicidal.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
You get that emotion onto the paper.
And out of you, so that you can look at it with that meditative distance. That's so important.
But it's also like squeezing the poison out of a wound.
Yeah,
getting it on the paper. And then not just that, but taking that and I'm just taking this poison out and turning it into something beautiful.
Right. It's that healing, it's that transformation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Poetry, and you can read, you can be at a low point in your life and you read an author, you get lost in a story and it may take you away, it gives you moments. But there's something about the sharpness and the briefness of poetry that is a cutting edge.
It's a lance on a boil.
and it's short enough that you can carry it with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
In memory, where you can't carry a whole novel with you.
No.
You can carry how the novel made you feel.
Right.
But you can carry a poem.
And you won't get to that feeling necessarily, or you won't even know you'll be getting to that feeling, or when you'll get to that feeling. Whereas with a poem, it's, some of these poems you guys have heard have been very, very short, and then some of them, as we continue, will get longer and shorter. Will sort of ebb and flow, and that's part of it too. That you can get that feeling so quickly. You can get to that moment, that either that removal of the poison or that awareness of the poison or whatever it is that it's doing to you.
Transmutation of the poison.
Transmutation, that's a good word.
So, LJ is up.
Oh, yes.
So this is an interesting poem that sort of showed up. I know you put them in randomly, because this one was really written for me to understand my anger. You know, we live in a culture, or at least I was raised in a family where we didn't express anger. Anger and strong emotions were a no-no. And so even to this day, I have trouble expressing anger. And so for me, poetry is really the only way, or the best way, that I can do that. And I'll read the poem, and then you can sort of judge it for yourself from where it was written in 2014. Game theory. This is not war. I am not a grieving mother. There is nothing for me to reconcile. The history I learned is an unbroken narrative of hope, not a story told in bloody pictographs, the graffiti of despair. Tell me about progress, and I will show you how simple it is to turn aside, sated, our bellies bloated by promises. Our gratitude is rancid with guilt, and still we feast on the dead. Loss is bleak anger in black faces, other lives. It does not touch us. We are immune. We deserve this fortunate geography, zip codes like lucky lottery numbers. How simple to cash in our winnings and conveniently forget who owns the game. I clutch my ticket in a death grip. There is nothing for me to reconcile. I am not a grieving mother. This is not war.
And you still touch that emotion when you read it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting too, that you guys, it doesn't matter when you wrote it, you can go back to where you were when this poison came out.
Yeah.
Or passion or whatever it was.
And there's both an upside and a downside to that, because we all want our emotions to move us forward and grow and somehow. And when this happens, however, the whole time heals everything. Some things shouldn't heal, they should evolve.
Yes, I was going to
Yes.
say, hearing that, like, yes, I need to hear that now. More people need to hear that now. And again. And again,
because these things keep
Yeah.
happening. The things that sparked that poem
Right.
haven't stopped happening.
I said that to
Yeah.
somebody recently. There's a few political musicals, and certainly I think the thing that must upset Bob Dylan the most is that his work is still so relevant.
Yeah.
I think he would like it to be dated.
Yes.
I think in his heart of hearts, I've always said this about the men who wrote the musical Hair. I think they wish it were a lot less relevant than it remains. They wrote it as a period piece. It should not still be so relevant, so painful, so truthful 40 years later.
Right.
I think Bob Dylan would love to have be looked at in a, wasn't that a terrible time kind of way.
And haven't we moved forward?
Isn't it great how we've, yes.
Yeah.
Not
so
wow.
much.
We haven't moved,
Yeah, I was at a service recently that was to honor Martin Luther King Jr. because of the 50th anniversary, and it's also the day he died was the year anniversary of when he did his talk about the Vietnam War.
Oh, yeah.
And they referenced his Vietnam War talk, questioning us what we were doing in the Vietnam War.
Right.
And then, did the thing about the anniversary of his death. And then they had a quote that was just recently given by Joan Baez about the Martin Luther King Jr. that she knew. And how little had actually changed.
Well, the poem that I think is the most relevant is Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. And he wrote that in 1913, 1914.
Okay, now we have to go look that one up.
Turning in a widening gyre, the falcon does not hear the falconer.
Oh.
Things fall apart.
Okay.
And the
quote's from
last lines of the book is, and what rough beast slouches toward Bethlehem waiting to be born. it's an anti-war poem written during the First World War, but the falcon does not return to the falcon, or things fall apart. That is as relevant in this very moment than it was in 1915, 1916, whenever it was written.
Yep.
And in the late in the late early 1900s, James Thomas Lowell wrote one that also, because they had actually quoted that was as part of it, and it was still as powerful today, and it was about the Mexican-American War.
Yeah.
So we have poems that go back 2,000 years about the evils of war.
Yeah.
And it has yet stopped us from engaging in it.
No. And the poets and the writers and the filmmakers will continue to rail against it as long as we can, until such time as
because all art is
against
political.
The dying of the light.
Yes. Yes.
So interesting, because the next poem is one I wrote called My Mistress Death.
Oh.
In the poetry world, there are no accidents.
That is true.
Death, like a mistress, beckons me. She promises to be gentle. For only one moment of pain, she will give me an eternity of ecstasy. To be like the frightened virgin upon her wedding night. Will it really be all that is being whispered so sweetly in my ears? Or just a promise to get what is wanted from me? No more pain, she says. No more struggles, she promises. Money, possessions, insatiated physical desires do not exist there. She tempts me, knowing my greatest wants, my greatest pains and fears, my greatest dreams. She knows what all good lovers know, and tempts me. But there is no freedom there. The price, a price of enslavement. No choices, no new experience. Just existence between the lines. She says she offers me an eternity in heaven, or is it a glorious cell in hell? I wander aimlessly. Is the heaven and hell on earth better than the one waiting in eternity? And if I decide neither mistress appeals for me, then I will create a different choice just for me.
I like that.
Yeah.
Just existence between the lines. That's a very nice line.
It's interesting because it was one of those times when I said, is the quality of what I'm living worth the continuation of it? And I think that's because there's
whoa. Yes. That's a very big thought. Is the quality of what I'm living worth the continuation of it?
And it's interesting, and I sometimes blame this on part of my astrology chart, because I have a lot of Scorpion energy in me, which is about death and rebirth.
Yep.
I mean, I'm a Cancer, but I have a lot of Scorpion energy in it. And one of the reasons poetry, I believe, suits me so well, I like to believe, I could be fooling myself, is that I'm constantly going through the death and rebirth process. And poetry is almost the perfect medium for the death and the rebirth process.
Yeah.
And, going through this of going, okay, is this the life I want to be living? Does it need to go away? What does that mean? Does it mean I have to kill the whole life? Is there a part of the life I have to kill? Is this life?
Is it time to jump without a net?
Yeah, is it time to jump without a net? The relationship I was talking about that I was in before, the one that kind of poked me about
Press the poetry button.
Press the poetry button. We were together for 7 years, and one of the things that people found fascinating, two things about this relationship. One was that every year, for the whole 7 years we were together, we would take one whole day, leave all of our technology behind, go out into nature, and we would spend all day talking about what worked and what didn't work in our relationship, what we felt we were getting, what we felt we needed, and did we want to renew for another year.
Wow.
That's good.
Every year we would go and we would do this. And when we got to a point where it was time for us to go separate ways, this relationship actually ended with us going on a divorce honeymoon to Mallorca for 10 days. Had a great time. Celebrated everything that was good. Celebrated that we would always love each other, but we no longer had a joint vision of a life we wanted to build together.
That's one of the most beautiful divorce stories I've ever heard. I love that.
You know, and so, but that all plays into this whole idea of mistress death. It's like, you know, you get promised, and I, who am not a big religion fan, you know, think that religion makes lots of promises that they can't keep.
But going back to the topic we had just before, so does war.
Yeah.
Yes.
War makes a lot of promises for a better life afterwards, for whoever the victor is going to be, or for the reason we went into this in the first place.
There's a lot of war based on religion.
Number one reason throughout all of history has been the excuse of religion.
I know, which is...
My God's bigger than your God. That's what we
so
get for
sad.
having the world
and of
as a
course, and you have the whole
patriarchy.
heaven and hell thing, which, and I was raised in Judaism, which we don't
Have a hell.
or
Yeah.
heaven. It's this life, guys. We have no guarantee on the next one. You're going to build it now. Is sort of the general.
Build it now and they'll come.
Well, you know, built it right, and that's a possibility. But you know, but it's interesting that the death becomes and two of you. I don't know if LJ is or not, are tarot card readers. Death is such an analogy.
Yes.
Such a stand-in, such a symbol, such a power, and a powerful tool
Yeah.
potentially.
So, you're up.
Oh, okay. Oh, here's one of my feminist poems.
Oh, before we get to your favorite, how old were you when you wrote, by the way, Mr. Steph? Do you know how long ago that was? Not say how old you were, but how long ago?
I wrote Mistress Death about 15 years ago.
I'm always curious where these are falling in your personal timelines.
Yeah.
Because I think that's interesting too. I mean, the TP Angel you said was very recent.
So the one I read last week about the grackle was last year. And then this poem was 2014, this last one.
So that's right. You said that one was recent. So this one.
This one I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
It was when I did like 10, 15 feminist poems because I was going through issues with
This is what's on my mind and on my heart.
And
now.
this one I want to say there's a rhythm to the third stanza that I'm not keen on, so it may still be revised. But the feeling in this is something that matters a lot to me. So this is a woman has to ask. When you've hit that damn glass ceiling more times than you can count. So you draw a knife, maybe take the life of that troll who blocks the stairs. Did you really get there on your merit or by some arcane blood sacrifice? A woman has to ask. When your body is the flavor du jour, a favorite hot button debate, you want to dress without the stress of blame when all you wanted was a date. Do you cover in sweet modesty?
Click. Thank you.
Or bare your flesh in all its beauty, despite your sister's finger-wagging shame? A woman has to ask. When life is on the line and your physician says you're fat, so it's your own damn fault for being lazy, or you're crazy because there's no reason for the pain you claim is really holding you back. Is the effort and anxiety and sheer energy to fight not harder than letting them think they're right? Even though when you die, the world will sigh and still say it's your own damn fault. A woman has to ask. When Human Resources has lost your 5th sexual harassment complaint, and it's against company policy to save emails, or talk to cohorts, or share pay, or talk lack of raise and pay, or mention a particular name in the same sentence as particular acts, and your performance review marks you down for not being a team player. When you point out Bob got credit for your idea, do you leave the game of Russian roulette, knowing someone still has to take the bullet, but at least today it won't be you? A woman has to ask. When she is too quiet to be heard, when she is too loud to be sensible, when just the sound of her voice grates on nerves, when she comes off too nice, when she needs to take charge, when she needs to not be bitchy, what tone is there left? A woman has to ask. when her words are suspect because she is a she could be playing the sex card, playing the sex and race card, crying for attention after his money, trying to ruin his promising future, out for vengeance. What words would they even believe? A woman has to ask. Because if she demands justice, commands attention, leads a fight, cries oppression, if she pushes for change or just a safe space, they say, well, why can't you just ask? When she's been asking a very long time, why a woman has to ask.
Ooh. There's that anger again.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Channeling a little inner Maya Angelou there.
Yes, I hear that. Now that you say that.
That'd make a great slam piece.
Yeah.
Thank you. More of my, and that's funny, so stylistically, more of my feminist stuff ends up having that slam and that beat feel to it, which I find interesting when I look back at my writing.
Then the anger also then probably has that slam and beat feeling. I love how your voice changes, all of you, when you read different things and from their times, and you return to the voice of who you were and how you were. And that one you said was written 4 or 5 years ago. Wow, could have written yesterday.
Yeah.
Without any problem. I particularly love the section on towards the end about referring to the men and his, because it reminded me there was a rape case where, how could he be punished for 20 minutes of bad decision making?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I remember that.
That's a flashback.
Promising future.
That was the line. That was the line of the poem.
That was
Promising
exactly
future.
What it was.
Yes, that was exactly.
That
in
was the
response-
case.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, so congratulations. You absolutely resonated that one right. But yes, that whole.
And it wasn't just that. So there was the Brock case.
Right.
But years before.
It wasn't the first like that.
No, it wasn't. But they used that same line when there was the football team that was doing that.
Oh, yeah.
What about their promising futures? And then, oh my God, I should remember. It was a big thing. And when I did my first round of feminine woman poetry, the really big rape case that they caught on video begins with an S.
It'll come to me when I don't need it.
But that one, just Steubenville, the whole Steubenville, and the reaction to that, I was physically ill for months reading about that. And so that all just got puked up and lanced out and bled out into a lot of poems, and it still keeps coming because it's a cancer that hasn't totally been eradicated.
Oh, no, we don't not eradicated
today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We still have the issue today. It's awful.
And as you pointed, and the same language is being repeated. They're promising futures, or it was only this time. It was one mistake. It was. I know as somebody who watches things like Law and Order, SVU, or even the regular ones, it's amazing when they go back to the first and second seasons and you go, wow, that was, some of them are 15, 16 years old now, and yet we're back to still just as relevant. Hasn't changed enough. But
No.
I like the beat in that one.
Thank you.
It's funny. I do the same kind of beat if I'm doing political. Or I've done a couple of poems around GLBT issues. And I was like, I recognize that beat.
Oh, yeah.
It's a Lady Macbethy kind of.
It's a pounding my hand on the table.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It is. It's a pounding your hand on the table.
Now, I noticed that the next poem we have coming up is mine again, but we should, did we read all the ones we had sent, you had sent in?
I don't know, but I have some others that I can.
So go ahead and choose one that you'd like to read, lap read.
Sure.
Not to be confused with a lap dance.
Never could be confused with a lap dance.
So
Depends on the poem she's
I would
reading.
say some poems are lap dances.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's
So I
some
have a
lap
few of
dances
those.
that are pure poetry.
Yes.
I have a few of
I
those.
have a Peaches
You should
poem
write,
that's a
don't you
lap
think?
dance. Go ahead.
So
Some lap dances that are pure. I'm sorry, I'm still wrapping my head around there are some lap dances that are pure poetry.
So it's interesting that I tend to come back to a lot of religious imagery in my poem, even though I am not a very religious person. But I actually attend, I'm Jewish, and I attend Friday morning services at our temple every Friday morning because, well, I sit there and I argue with a God I'm sure doesn't exist, but I haven't been struck by lightning yet, so I guess I'm okay. And I'm there mostly in service to other people so they can say Kaddish in mourning for their loved ones. You need 10 Jews to make a legal service.
10 adult Jews.
10 adult Jews. Anyway,
Yes.
long story short, this is one of the poems that I wrote while I was mourning my father's death. And it also has a political connection that you'll probably get. And it's called Shloshim, which is a Hebrew word for the you count a certain number of days after someone has died that you are in active mourning. Shloshim. How long must I count Shloshim? I buried my father 21 days ago. In a week, I would have unpinned the torn black ribbon for one final time. But every day the clock begins anew. Fresh grief winds up the old. 9 new names to stand for and recite Kaddish, each one someone's beloved. The rituals of loss bring no rest to the dead. The living bring casseroles, prayers, and pie to the funeral table. I mean no disrespect, not to the 9 lost to hatred, not to their families joined in their death. I don't know what else to do, so I recite Hebrew words I barely read, transliterated into helpful English. They bring me a small comfort as I look around at the other congregants, men and women gathered here on an early Friday morning, so I can publicly mourn my father. A minyan, 1 mourner and 9 others, 1 life for each of the lost. Our little chapel has no locked doors. Evil could sit here, invisible among us too, leaving the stricken survivors to start the count again. So that was written June 20th, 2015, after Charlottesville. After the Charlottesville where the church,
The church.
the 9 were killed in the church.
I love that you found the parallel between the 1 mourner and the 1 plus 9.
Yeah. You know, and again, this was one that just came out. I was so angry.
Yeah.
And I was mourning my father, and I was sitting in the minyan, and there were 10 of us. And it could have been us.
Yep. Yep.
Anybody is welcome to come to services.
Actually, I go to a temple that's locked all the time. You have to be buzzed in for that purpose, that potential.
And what a world.
There's a few times where the front doors aren't, but for the most part, yeah. It's always interesting when our lives have those unexpected overlaps.
Yes.
You know, a big tragedy with an intimate one.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're very, and I can see why poetry becomes perfect then for that, because it is that mixing, that blending, that trying to understand, and that is how it feels too. It's too big for me to understand, it's too big for me to feel, yet I'm feeling it, and I'm in this tiny moment, and I'm also doing this, and I'm also part of this. And
The parallel of the micro and the macro.
yeah.
Yeah, how we apply it.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Well, go ahead.
Poetry is holographic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, you know, you can enter it here, but it's here,
Yeah. And the next time you can enter it,
there, yes.
which again makes it very different from any other medium. You know, I'm not, unless it's a book I've read before and I'm looking for something specific, I'm not going to enter the book in a different location.
Right.
I'm not going to enter the movie. Although I have entered, obviously we all have our favorite movies, like, oh yeah, I'm lost for the next hour because it's halfway through and I'm going to watch it. But for the most part, and even if we do enter it that way, we tend to have the first hour we missed or whatever runs through our head.
Yeah.
We don't enter any other medium the different ways you can enter a poem. Yet another unique facet.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I went from death, you went to feminism, you went to politics. This one is actually a poem called Hidden, which is an LGBT poem that's got a little politics and the LGBT version of feminism.
All right, yeah.
It's called Hidden. You ask why I do not stay just hidden. It's okay to be me as long as I do not tell you about it. You sure I'm all right in some perverse way. So if I just don't tell you, then you can like me in your ignorance. Speak not of the things you know not, except through the front pages of the supermarket counter magazines. You are too Christian to want to see me bleed. You gave up that sport 100 years ago. But you also do not want to hear about my pain. And do not let you know that I can be human and be one of them, for they are animals, and you know me. For I am your friend that held you when you were in pain, when all the others turned their back, uncomfortable with your grief. Perhaps I am your brother or sister, the aunt or uncle to your children, someone you used to fight with, dream with, maybe you even took baths with me. I might be a favorite cousin or a treasured school teacher, the person who at some point has changed your life in a positive way. I am your father or mother, I am your child and your friend, and it's okay as long as I stay hidden. As long as I perpetuate your fairy tales, discreetly avoid certain conversations, or better yet, even lie, it makes you feel better. It's okay as long as I am hidden, shoved away in dark corners, left in dark alleys, and am not the one that got beaten to death while walking home.
Whoa.
It's okay as long as you don't see or hear my pain, and you can hide in your ignorance, telling yourself your lies, asking me to confirm them. Yes, it's better for you. For if you come out of hiding, you might have to grow. Growth is painful, and pain that is mine is easy for you, easier than to ask the pain you might feel if you grow. For in that growth, you might realize that you are not God's only child. And sometimes those people in black robes that spew hate in the name of God might have lied to you. And if they lied to you about that, what else did they lie to you about? Perhaps they do not know the way to heaven. What if you cannot just sit back in stagnation and go to heaven? Maybe you might have to go through the pain of becoming human. No, it is better if it is hidden. Do not work too hard to become human. Do not upset all you've been told. Of course, they are right. But as you drift off to sleep tonight, if you question them, keep it hidden. Do not show your doubts. Feel no pain for anyone but yourself, and fall asleep dreaming of how you will get your wings, not if.
Good.
And there's that anger again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's a safe place
Yeah.
to express it.
Yeah. That was written after Matthew Shepard.
Yeah.
Oh, Laramie. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That one prompted a lot of poetry.
Yeah.
Actually, quite, and because I know that I've read the reviews of books and things, and young adult and children's poetry, middle grade poetry that was written honoring him and what had happened and feelings and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I remember that around that time that happened, that I would have all of these people that come on wanting to say, well, he must have done something to deserve it.
Right.
If he was a little less obvious, he should
It's
have been.
very similar to the woman has to
Yeah.
ask.
It's a cross section.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the time of don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was very hard. And I had people that I cared about, that I loved. I had family members that were just like, well, blah, 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 blah. And the interesting thing was, at that point, I filled in some of my family on history that I had never shared with them. Not that I came out, because I've been out so long that if they found the pieces of my closet to be an antique, they could put it together. But I had to tell them about, the time I got put in the hospital, the time I got beaten in a back alley they never knew about because I didn't tell them. The things that had happened to me personally, to have them sit there and go, well, when you're that kind of person, you should expect those things to happen.
Right.
You're saying that to my, oh no. There was
Don't
a lot
go
of
there.
there was
Don't-
a lot of come home to Jesus meetings around that. So anyways.
And that goes back to, there's a great meme that's, of Jesus saying, love thy neighbor. Well, what if did I stutter? Did I suggest any, and leave out? No, it was supposed to be all encompassing, and it did go back to the fact that they suddenly had to wake up and suddenly had to look. Alyssa Milano talks about how when she posted one day on Twitter, if you went through this, just use the Me Too hashtag, and she woke up the next day to 24,000 Me Too hashtags, and she said she lost the feelings on her legs. She literally just sort of crashed down and started to cry, and This happened to you with Laramie. It was those were Me Too moments for you, and you can say to your family, "No, I didn't do anything, try anything."
Yep.
And they still try to
Yep.
see justifications, or maybe you did this, or what if you had done this? What if you dressed wrong, said wrong, stood out too much, stood out too.
Yep.
See, I think some of the power in poetry is that there's no othering in poetry, right? We read it and we are there in the poem. It is us. I might not have had that same experience, but I am there in that poem. And so there is no way to other the poet or the feeling in the poem.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, I get goosebumps. It is. It's true. I think maybe that's what either scares people about, oh, I don't like poetry.
You don't want to feel.
Don't, the things we say we don't like do have a tendency towards maybe potentially because they uncover or say something about us. I mean, this one talks about that uncovering of, if the priests and the clergy were wrong about that, what else are they going to be wrong about? And I think that's still seeing, that aspect of the poem too is also still seeing reverberations.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've had people I've shared that poem with that have gotten very angry at me for that poem.
How dare you make them uncomfortable?
Oh yes, yes.
You bad poet, you.
Yes, I know. I just
insidious and saying the things we don't want to say and showing us the things we don't want to see. And Anais Nin said that art doesn't show us what we know, it shows us what we're not willing to know, or something like that. It was something wonderful about how it forces us, and there's certainly much art.
There's that other quote that I love about art should comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Yes.
Oh, I like that.
I don't know who said it, but it's one of my favorite quotes.
I came across it recently. Yeah.
Ooh, I'll have to look that up. I like that.
Yeah.
Trisha, you're up.
Okay.
That's one of
about
mine.
to say that one's one of LJ's.
Okay.
But that's one of yours.
This one is mine.
Okay.
It must have been just out of order.
Yeah.
Well, you said make them random.
Oh, okay.
And they randomized it.
All right. So this is Stone Angels. This is one of the first poems that I wrote. So this is a long, long time ago, 15, 20 years, where I'm like, I feel poetry. I really think that I can write more poetry, because you go through like high school and college and you have that specific poetry. And then, you're supposed to be an adult. and there's this sense of like poetry's for like the goth angsty teens and 20-somethings. So I stepped away from it for a while. And then I came back when I had more issues with the church. So of course, this is one of my dealing with the church.
Well, we keep the theme does keep seem creeping in circles, doesn't it? Go ahead.
All right, so this is Stone Angel. This is my body. Take it, all of you, and transubstantiate it. Faith moves mountains. I am stone. If you can turn bread into flesh, why not marble? If you can change wine into blood, why not granite? With thy hand, draw from these carven lines tears or smiles or humors, and soften molded features with thy grace. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. For this trumpet has teased these lips so long, and my fingers itch to strike this harp. These wings, they long to reach so high with muscle and sinew and bone and hope, to fly up, up, to fly with the echoing off-key alleluia attributed to my silent, petrified lips.
Muscle and sinew and bone
And hope. That's a beautiful line.
I like that.
Yeah, the substantial with the apparent insubstantial, the thing that can't be nailed down.
And that one's like very specifically Catholic, because you have the whole transubstantiation.
Oh, and Kyrie eleison.
Yeah. Catholic. It is definitely Catholic.
I learned the word transubstantiate from a Tom Lehrer song.
Oh God, I learned it from I first heard it in a book, Tales of the City by Amistad Maupin.
I know Amistad Maupin, the whole thing in San Francisco.
Yeah.
No, I was the Vatican rag.
Yeah.
Seriously funny. They didn't like it. But, we don't transubstantiate in Judaism.
No. And there we go. So you are up, and this will probably be our last point for the show. And we'll have a couple minutes of wrap up.
Okay.
Because we had to edit.
So this
Yes.
comes from my pottery background, and there's a Japanese art called kintsugi, which means repairing with gold. So if in the Japanese tradition, if you have a piece of pottery that's broken, instead of trying to glue it so that
that's the wabi-sabi.
Right, so you don't glue it so that the repair is invisible, you call attention to the repair by filling it with gold.
Oh, interesting.
So the poem is called Kintsugi, and the epigraph is, "There's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in." That's a Leonard Cohen quote. No relation, though I wish I could claim one. The wheel squeaks as it spins, the platter catching on the splash guards as I wrestle a cold, wet lump from shapeless mass into symmetrical cone. It is harder than you realize, this process of centering. First your body, then your mind, then the clay. The thunk, thunk, thunk of the wheel is the heartbeat of the studio. My own heart settles into its rhythm. I am not perfect. This is not effortless. I create a 4-pound mess. Over and over, I recycle the clay, pounding it with my frustration until my hands find their own wisdom and a round form blooms beneath my fingers. A tea bowl, a coffee mug, a serving platter. Some days I spin magic, other days disasters. Later, I will glaze these hard-won treasures. If the overlapping colors craze, I will wipe the broken surfaces with ink and watch the cracks spiderweb across each piece, a reminder of what it means to be beautiful, what it means to be whole.
I like that.
Yeah.
I love the because we've spoken about your pottery, the things you have to center. First my body, then the mind, then the clay.
Yes.
And knowing as you read it that if you do that out of order, it doesn't work.
No.
And I'm guessing from the laughter and the squeak is like I tried.
Many times.
Tried to center the clay first, but God darn it, it's got to be me.
I have to say, I just love the line, the thunk, thunk, thunk of the wheel is
Yep.
the heartbeat.
Yep.
You can just,
Yep.
Yep.
This is not Demi Moore and.
No ghosts behind me.
No.
Doesn't
Well,
go
you know,
away.
if Patrick Swayze was behind you right now, he'd be a ghost.
I'd be okay with that.
You would, and no
It'd
problem.
be all right.
But,
Yeah. Well, you know, if we weren't out of time, I'd try to do a little mediumship for
There
you,
you
but
go.
it's not that. It's
So we
not that
channel
show.
Patrick.
Yeah.
Wrong show.
Wrong
Another
show.
Different day.
That's my other show. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to be getting to wrap up. I'm going to. I have a question for both of you that I'd like to ask you, and then I want you to give a last, whatever your closing thought on poetry is, and we'll
Okay.
call it a day. Would you guys ever be interested in coming back and having, like, let's say each of us bring in 3 to 5 poems, whatever, pass them around and read each other's poetry?
Ooh,
Yes,
yeah, that'd
absolutely.
be fun.
What do you think, guys? You can
Yeah.
comment down below.
You can comment
Yes.
down below. I love to read somebody else's poetry, and I love to hear how somebody else would read my poetry, because sometimes it changes the whole poem.
Yes.
Yes.
You guys game?
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
absolutely.
cool.
Absolutely.
So we'll do that.
Excellent.
Yeah. I'm going to start with you. So closing thoughts,
Sure.
and what would you say to our poets out there?
So poetry doesn't have to be all gloom and doom and serious. As I was actually talking to Rona before we started, that one of the first poems I ever memorized was an Ogden Nash poem. It's the shortest poem I know, and it's called Fleas. It's 2 words, Adam had 'em. That's the whole poem. So there's humor to be
Yep.
found in poetry, and humor and every range of human emotion. And if you are a word person and have emotions that you don't know what to do with, pour them onto the page and see what happens. You might find you're a poet.
And you have a copy of your book.
This is an accidental poetry collection. I put this collection together years ago as a gift for friends and family for one Hanukkah. And I did it on Lulu Press. And they had at some point taken every project that was not explicitly put as a private project, digitized it, and put it on iBooks. So I get royalties from this book on iTunes that I never tell, no one knows about. I don't know how they find it, but every quarter I get enough money to buy a few lattes at Starbucks. And that really amuses me.
And what is it called?
Chop Wood, Carry Water, Poems of the Ordinary.
Oh,
That's
nice.
lovely.
Closing thoughts on poetry and
I
message to
think
our poets?
keep playing with it. And I want to kind of borrow it's okay to have small p and large p poems.
Yes.
You can write poetry for yourself and not have to share it. And then you can write poetry for yourself and then change it if you want to share it. The thing with poetry is you have so much control in so many dimensions when you write your poetry. So have fun with it, explore with it, rewrite it, play with save as, and see if it becomes something else, and use it as a way to explore the complicated emotions that you may not want to share with people, or that you can't figure out any other way to share with people. And by playing with poetry that way, it gains a meaning for yourself, and then if you do share it, there are people out there who will be like, you understand me. And that's an amazing magic of itself.
Poetry, as we've all said, it has saved our lives. And at times, I'm sure, has saved other people's lives.
Yes.
And we've all had our lives saved by somebody else's poem. You know, poetry is so much more diverse than people think it is. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a good old-fashioned. I kind of like to. I mean, it should have a rhythm to me. It should have a rhyme. I mean, that's me. And I like stanzas, as you probably noticed as I was reading them. I like the form. We talked about form, and you know that sometimes form helps you create the thing. But you can use poetry to paint a picture of something that's touched you in nature. I have a ton of nature poetry. You can use poetry to write to do a portrait of somebody that has touched your life. Tons of people poets.
Yeah.
So it's emotions, and there's always an emotionality to it, I believe, because can you look at a beautiful nature scene and not feel an emotion? If you see a picture of somebody and it speaks to you, does it not do it?
Yep.
But
Yeah.
play. Play.
Play.
Yeah.
Play. Find somebody that has touched you, an experience that's touched you, a moment in the
moment.
woods, a sunrise that spoke to you, whatever, and write about it and see how that goes. Maybe there's not a poet lurking in you, but you're never going to know if you don't try.
I'm going to add one more thing you made me think of. So the form and stanza and words are all different tools that you get to play with. So it's added dimensions, but also, because I've been saving a bunch of the live ones that I've done to YouTube, you can record something and not share it. So you can take a poem and not just get it out on the paper and play with those feelings, explore those feelings that way. You can read it out loud to yourself and record it. And actually saying the poem is another exercise of its dimension, of its healing power, of its exorcism power. And the words you choose, the strength you put in them, the rhythm, and breathing adds to like this meditative part of it. And so do that. You don't even have to share those. You can record them and save them for yourself and get that out there too.
Performing your poetry is so important, which is why I've invited you ladies back so we can perform each other's poetry.
Yes.
And performing poetry, I think, is very important. And that's how I edit. When I do the first draft, and then it's like, I need to read it to somebody, and I have 4 or 5 people that have basically said, whenever you write a poem, you can call me. I'm happy to hear it. And I think that that's so important. I think any of us need that is, who can I call and say, okay, now I'm going to read it to you. And as I read it to you, I'm going to stop in the middle. I'm going to change a word. I may do something. I'm going to read it back. Maybe I'm going to read it to you 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that? But I will bet every one of you out there that if you tried that you would find 3 to 5 people in your life that would put their hand up and say yes.
Yeah.
Namaste.